Thanks, everybody. I want to begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people as traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay respects to elders past and present in full recognition that this land was stolen and that sovereignty was never ceded. There is so much unfinished business and so much healing to do. The Greens remain committed to the goals of treaty, sovereignty and a voice to Parliament, so First Nations people can be in control of those issues that directly affect their future. I also want to acknowledge my talented, wonderful, intelligent, compassionate team of senators and MPs, our staff who are here today, who have done an incredible job working for a future for all of us. Politics should give you something to believe in. Big ideas based on real evidence and full of heart. Ideas that shape a future for all of us. The Greens recognise that everything is connected and that our environmental and economic challenges are tightly interwoven. That's especially clear at this election, where we face the twin challenges of climate change and economic inequality. We are the only party with an evidence-based, independently costed, positive plan to address those twin challenges. It's a plan that offers voters a real choice. The choice to continue the status quo, where 1 in 3 big corporations pay no tax, so we pay it for them, or a choice to do something else. 1.5 million people voted for the Greens at the last election because they chose something else. They believe in our big picture, long-term progressive agenda for Australia, and they want us to keep the bastards honest. By any objective measure, we've delivered for them in spades. Greens MPs working together with the community have forced the two old parties to face up to the issues that they would rather avoid. We've kept climate change at the heart of the national debate, a debate where the ongoing failure of leadership and governance has resulted in the Liberal Party dumping their leader rather than taking the action that's required. It was the Greens who led the charge on a Royal Commission to lift the lid on the fraud and corruption in the banking and finance sector, while the two major parties voted against it. It was my predecessors, Bob Brown and Christine Mill, who flew the flag for a decade as lone voices for marriage equality. And finally, in this parliament, it became law. In one of my first meetings with Malcolm Turnbull, he told me he would not support our long-standing call for a national anti-corruption watchdog. Well, guess what? Now a national anti-corruption watchdog has cross-party support and it will soon become law. My colleague Senator Steele-John, who was never going to give up until justice was served, helped secure a Royal Commission into violence, abuse and neglect of people with disability. A levy on the banks, access to medicinal cannabis, advancing the drug law reform debate, fixing the backpacker tax while getting $100 million for land care. A breakthrough for more compassionate treatment of refugees. We've held the line on bad legislation and we've held a rotten government to account. We've protected laws that prevent racial discrimination. We've blocked cuts to health and education. And we've stopped big business getting massive tax cuts in the name of trickle-down economics. The list of Greens' achievements in this parliament is a long one. What we've achieved has made this country a better place. It was achieved through the long, hard slog of taking a principled position, being told by the rich and powerful that it would never happen, arguing for it anyway until the public was on side, then finding a pathway in the parliament to work it into law. That's leadership. The Greens play a critical role in our parliament And at this election, the stakes have never been higher. We are living in the age of the Anthropocene. Human activity is now the dominant influence on our climate and the environment. For the first time in history, we humans have the capacity to dramatically alter all life on Earth. And we are changing it drastically. We are the cause of the 6th mass extinction event in this planet's 4.5 billion year history. The leadbeater's possum, koalas, Carnaby's cockatoos, all threatened with extinction. We lose these and we lose a part of ourselves. It's not about Liberal or Labor or Greens. It's not actually about Australia or any one country. What this is quite literally about is whether we, Homo sapiens, have the collective intelligence and the willingness to prevent the breakdown of our climate. And so far, we are failing that test. Australia's pollution keeps rising and there's no plan in sight from the Liberals or Labor to significantly reduce emissions, let alone at the rate scientists say we need to in order to stabilise our climate. We've had a horrifying preview of things to come over the past few months. Tasmania's temperate rainforests, many not adapted to bushfires, have been obliterated. 1 million dead fish in the Murray-Darling Basin. Townsville ravaged by floods in the days after the hottest January was ever recorded. A drought across the entire state of New South Wales. And just today we've learnt about the dangerous overheating threatening Queensland's northern tropics. Another possum that wasn't even on the extinction list is now at threat of being wiped out. We are at a critical moment. Shockingly, appallingly, the Liberals and Labor intend to ramp up the production of fossil fuels even further. Coal in the Galilee Basin, that's 5 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide from one mine alone, with more to follow. Opening up fracking in the Northern Territory, that's another 35 billion tonnes. Drilling for oil in the Great Australian Bight, not just another carbon bomb, but it also threatens 750 kilometres of coastline from South Australia, Victoria, Tasmania, all the way up the east coast of New South Wales. The bottom line is, if you don't have a plan to transition away from polluting fossil fuels like coal, oil and gas, then you do not have a plan to tackle the greatest challenge facing all life on Earth, the breakdown of our climate. Now, we all know that the Liberals have been a disaster when it comes to tackling climate change. What do you expect from a PM who comes into Parliament and waves a lump of coal around? A vote for Scott Morrison is a vote for more drought, it's a vote for more bushfires, it's a vote for the destruction of the Great Barrier Reef and the Murray-Darling Basin. That is their record, and another 3 years will only intensify their damage to the environment and the economy. But for all of Labor's talk, they are proving to be a great disappointment already. They won't stop the Adani coal mine in the Galilee Basin, and just today they were spruiking the approval of another thermal coal mine in Queensland. As if that's not bad enough, Labor has just committed $1.5 billion of your money to frack gas in the Beetaloo Basin of the Northern Territory. The Beetaloo and Macarthur Basins are Australia's biggest gas reserves, and fracking them will mean another 6.6% increase in climate pollution each year. It'll mean 1,200 gas wells sunk against the wishes of traditional owners and farmers alike, and it will mean taking precious water and contaminating our land. Labor's plan will mean another 35 billion tonnes of greenhouse gases trapping heat in our oceans and atmospheres. That's somewhere between 4 and 7 times the climate impact of the Adani coal mine. And worse still, Labor's offering public money, your money, to line the pockets of 3 energy giants. More money than the coalition ever shamefully offered Adani. It's not hard to see why. The oil and gas industry has its tentacles all over the Labor Party. There's the $2 million in declared donations since 2012 from the coal, oil and gas industry, and the millions more in dark money that's not even declared. Then there's the network of relationships and lobbying. Previous Labor Energy Minister Martin Ferguson left Parliament to be the chair of the oil industry's peak body. He was succeeded by Gary Gray, former executive of gas giant and multinational tax avoider Chevron, former Climate Change Minister Greg Combet and Trade Minister Craig Emerson, workers consultants to Santos, one of the 3 direct beneficiaries of this public money. Both the Prime Minister and the opposition leader have had coal lobbyists as their chief of staff. The boards and peak bodies of Australia's fossil fuel industry are littered with alumni from both sides of politics. We have no hope of cleaning up our environment until we clean up our politics. That's why the Greens will make it our first order of business to cap political donations and to get dirty money out of our politics. We'll ban MPs and senior staff from accepting lobbying jobs after they retire and require the publication of all meetings with lobbyists while they're in office. And we will root out corruption by establishing a federal anti-corruption watchdog that has real teeth. There's never been a more important time to have the Greens in the Senate. We've already made it clear we want to work with a shortened Labor government on climate policy because the alternative does not bear thinking about. But we are deeply concerned that in the face of a climate crisis, Labor have taken a weaker climate policy in 2019 than the policy they took in 2016, which is weaker again than the policy they had in 2013. A shortened Labor government will have 2 pathways after this election. They can either pursue a climate and energy policy designed to pass through a divided coalition party room to satisfy the likes of Tony Abbott and Barnaby Joyce, or they can negotiate a comprehensive response based on science with the Greens. My message to Bill Shorten is you cannot achieve bipartisanship with the Liberals when they cannot even agree with themselves. Let me tell you what the real long-term hope for bipartisanship is. It's that voters in key seats like Kooyong and Higgins send a clear message that climate denialism, that being a coal hugger is not a viable political strategy. That's how you achieve bipartisanship, by sending a clear message to the Liberals that business as usual will not be tolerated. So the decision for Bill Shorten is this. Is he going to take the take it or leave it approach that Kevin Rudd took? Or is he going to negotiate with the Greens like Julia Gillard did in 2011 to deliver a climate policy that gives future generations a chance? Our history shows we will work constructively with Labor. You know, apart from our climate laws, one of the biggest achievements in the 2010 Parliament was Medicare-funded dental care. It was a policy that I negotiated with the then Health Minister, Tanya Plibersek. It was a package that has endured through 6 years of budget cuts, and after a long campaign from the Greens, a commitment from Labor to expand it. It's another big idea we took to the 2010 election, another big idea that is now reality. And the next Parliament's a chance to do big things again. It has to be, because that is what's required of us. The IPCC have just given us over a decade to change course on dangerous climate change. That is 3 terms of parliament. We cannot afford to waste one of them. Now, the twin challenge to transitioning out of coal, oil and gas is tackling economic inequality. Australia has over 100,000 people who are homeless. We've got 1 in 6 children living in poverty, and the people doing it toughest are those on government payments. They rely on our support to keep the wolves from the door. The average Newstart recipient stays on Newstart for 3 years. Imagine the indignity of living on $40 a day for 3 years. Every politician who has opposed an increase to Newstart should be ashamed of themselves. It's only the Greens who have a plan to increase government payments like Newstart by $75 a week for nearly 1 million people so that everyone can live with dignity. Closely connected to poverty is housing stress. Anglicare released a survey this week looking at the affordability of 70,000 rental properties right around the country. Only 2 of them were affordable to people on Newstart. It's why we have a plan to ensure that everyone has a safe, affordable, sustainable home. We would build 500,000 new homes and create 30,000 new jobs in the process. All the evidence suggests that if you want to shift into generational poverty, you focus on education. Public schools educate the most disadvantaged students in the most disadvantaged areas, and they're funded the least. But every private school will be fully funded by 2023, but only 1% of public schools will be. Our education plan would properly fund our public schools. It would bring back free TAFE and uni to ensure everyone has the skills they need in a modern economy without the legacy of massive debt hanging over their heads. Of course, we understand that if we're going to secure a safe climate, if we're going to pay for universal social services, a home for all, free education, all of those things require an investment. But we are not going to accept the tired old argument that we can't afford it. Not while the choices of successive governments have left oil and gas companies sitting on a staggering $367 billion worth of tax credits. That's money they'll never pay in tax on income they earn from our resources. Not while the tax-free fuel rebate for mining companies continues. It is the government's 17th biggest expenditure. It's massive, and it's given a huge and unfair benefit to some of our largest and dirtiest companies. We're not going to tolerate those excuses while the government continues to subsidise private health insurers to the tune of billions of dollars. What they're doing, these private insurers, is charging more and more for less and less, and it's not taking the pressure off our public health system. This is a bipartisan, multi-billion-dollar policy failure. And we certainly won't tolerate their excuses while the government is pushing through $325 billion in tax cuts that flow overwhelmingly to people who don't need them. Tax has been a big issue during this debate, so it should be. Tax cuts matter because tax matters. Tax is one of the most powerful tools we have to curb excesses in wealth and to reduce poverty. It's a tool to pull risk and provide essential public services that the market alone will not provide. It's a tool to drive down pollution. Tax builds our communities. It paves our roads, it shelters our homeless, it teaches our children, it feeds our pensioners. Tax is how we build a decent society. Tax handouts, tax cuts, tax loopholes, they don't build a thing. Sure, We've picked some big fights with powerful vested interests. That's what our revenue proposals do. But you know what? We're up for that fight. That is the leadership you can rely on from the Greens. Over the last year, I've met with significant economic leaders like Ross Garnaut, Thomas Piketty and Joseph Stiglitz. They've shared concerns that our tax system isn't up to the task of setting us up for the next century. We know that. They understand the need to tax pollution, rent-seeking super profits and financial concentration. That's why we'll be seeking from Labor a commitment to undertake a serious review of how we structure our tax system to benefit people, not just their big corporate donors. This is important because if we can get the tax system working right, we can invest in the things that really matter. We can do everything the Greens have in our positive plan for this election. We can deliver the Greens' plan to put $2 billion a year towards restoring and protecting our natural places. We can tackle the waste crisis, reduce the impact of drought, save our forests and expand our marine reserves. Our plan will create 12,950 new jobs, revive regional communities and, most importantly, help prevent our animal extinction crisis. The Greens Nature Fund, our plan will bring threatened species like Tassie devils and swift parrots, so many of these wonderful things that we have the privilege of sharing this great country with. It'll bring back so many of these things from the brink. It will help our unique wildlife and landscapes thrive, not just protecting but restoring those landscapes, protecting them from invasive species, creating new havens for threatened mammals and properly funding those recovery plans for every single species that is at risk. We can deliver the Greens' plan for public services and public infrastructure. The Greens are proudly the party of public ownership. We'll create publicly owned energy and banking providers to inject more competition and deliver better services and lower prices for people. You can also rely on us to stop the sell-off of public assets like our electricity grid and the NBN. We can deliver the Greens' plan for a sustainable economy and jobs of the future where we protect workers' rights, improve wages and close the gender pay gap. We can deliver the Greens' plan for a world-class health system where dental services are free for everyone under Medicare, where we fund our hospitals and mental health services, wipe out hospital waiting lists and invest more in prevention. We can deliver the Greens' plan to treat refugees fairly and decently here in Australia rather than maintaining those offshore hellholes. And make no mistake, the Greens will stand up to the far right. We will celebrate our diverse community and protect people from homophobia, bigotry and racism wherever it occurs. We can do all of these things. We can do all of these things and more with Greens in Parliament, providing leadership, fighting for progressive outcomes. You can rely on us to push the next government to make better choices, to deliver better budgets that serve everyone, not just a few. I want to finish by acknowledging the young people in our audience today. Thanks so much for coming. We've got a number of climate activists. We've got people who participated in those inspiring school strikes. People who have taken their future into their own hands, who refuse to accept the status quo. Thank you for showing the leadership this government is not showing. Thank you. If a 13-year-old can fully grasp that we're at a critical point where the breakdown of our climate and the life that it supports is an ever-increasing possibility, then surely our Parliament can too. As far as we know, This precious little blue speck floating in space that we call planet Earth is the only place in the universe that supports life. The choices that we make in a few weeks' time will help determine whether it will continue to do so long after we're gone. More than ever, it's time for big, bold, evidence-based ideas that meet the challenges of the 21st century. More than ever, it's time for a genuine political alternative that thinks about the future, that cares for people, and that fights for the environment. Thank you. Thank you.